Yeah, welcome back. It's Richie McCormack here with you. And almost 2 weeks to the day since Newcastle sacked Steve Bruce as their manager, they look set to appoint a new boss. And that man appears to be former Arsenal and Paris Saint-Germain head coach Unai Emery. To talk us through how Newcastle have ended up here, we're joined by the Telegraph's journalist Luke Edwards. Luke, welcome back to the show.
Nice to be back.
I don't think you've had a dull few weeks, to say the least, since Amanda Staveley and the Saudis rolled back into town.
Well, I was off work with the kids last week for half term. That had some dull moments. No, it's been it's been pretty hectic. I mean, good fun as well. And kind of why you get into the job is for kind of moments like this. But yes, very manic. And I think the only people who've been slightly more manic than the journalists and the media is the consortium themselves, really. Yeah,
the question I think on a lot of people's lips is when they took over, because obviously the process of the takeover was expedited by the sorting out of the piracy issue between Qatar and Saudi Arabia, and that maybe the takeover came around a little bit quicker than possibly all parties were expecting it to happen. Would that be the case, and did they have a plan in place for once they took over?
Absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. That I don't think I can stress this enough. They didn't know this takeover was going to happen until literally a few days before it did. So I think in previously, if it had gone through earlier, for example, I think Rafa Benitez would almost certainly have come back as manager. They had plans in place. They were having meetings about recruitment, but I think everybody really had given up because of the piracy issue and the fact that the Saudis weren't doing anything to resolve it. And I think what changed was the Saudis took over the negotiations really themselves. They asked the Premier League what needed to be done, and they got it done. But that then left the consortium, who they've employed as maybe their partners. But you can't really employ a partner, but their partners in the consortium who are there running it day to day. I think they were caught by surprise, and what we've seen is a result of that. And actually it has been, I've used the word chaos in the Daily Telegraph. I think it has been very chaotic, and I hope that the appointment of a new manager will be the first sort of building block in the new regime, as it were. I think really they've been putting out fires, chasing their tail, whatever metaphor you want to use. And it has been chaotic. And I hope that the new manager coming in, who'll be followed by a director of football, who'll be followed by a chief executive, and they'll get this new management structure in place. And then I think we will see really what this takeover is all about.
That's the question I was going to get to next, because clearly, well, perhaps not clearly, but a sporting director of football, somebody in that role who would oversee footballing matters, seems to be a real key appointment for Newcastle and for the new owners. And you might think that is an appointment that they'd want to come before the actual manager itself. So the question is, who's actually handling, from the current and new takeover and new owner's perspective, who's actually handling the football talks, as it were?
It's by committee, and that's part of the problem. That's why everything takes a long time. I mean, Amanda Staveley and her husband Mirdad, they are ostensibly running the club on a day-to-day basis, but everything is signed off by the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, represented by the chairman Yasser Al Rumayyan. So one of the interesting things about the interview for Unai Emery was that Rumayyan was on that call. He was part of that interview. So, but then you've got Jamie Rubin as well, who's the other third of the consortium. So it's very difficult, and there's been a lot of competing voices. And I think if in an ideal world, and Newcastle fans would have been dismayed to hear this, but I think they actually wanted Steve Bruce to carry on as manager for a little bit longer until they could find a suitable replacement, possibly even until they got those next tiers up of the management structure in place, the sporting director and the chief executive. So it's just been chaotic. I'm going to keep using that word, but it has been chaotic because they're learning. These people as well, we have to remember, they've never run a football club before. They're not actually, with the exception of Jamie Rubin, who was on the board at QPR, they're not football people. So there has been a void there. They've all had their different advisors, and people have been sort of jostling for position, and people have wanted jobs and they've wanted contracts handed out. And actually, very sensibly, they've slowed things down a little bit. Sometimes I need to speak a little bit slower. They've slowed things down a little bit and just taken their time over this managerial search. They've spoken to a lot of people, canvassed a lot of opinion. They've talked to people within the game. They even talked to Steve Bruce, but before parting company with him about what he thought, and tapped into his little bit of football knowledge as well, which rightly or wrongly, he spent over 40 years in the game. It's probably the right thing to, well, from my point of view, it's certainly the right thing for them to do. So Unai Emery's appointment, and it's not definite yet. Yeah. We should stress that it is certainly not definite yet. But he would be, I think, a unifying choice. I think he's an outstanding candidate, and probably already shows where Newcastle are as a football club compared to where they were under Mike Ashley. Because under Mike Ashley, yes, they got Rafa Benitez, but that was a shock that they got Rafa Benitez. Nobody really saw that coming. The fact that Unai Emery, who's at a club, Rafa was out of work when he took the Newcastle job. The fact he is at a club that's playing in the Champions League, and they can realistically compete for a manager like that, shows you where instantly Newcastle have been elevated to on the sort of pecking order of English football clubs.
I'm interested to see when Emery's name came up, because I think you had a piece at the weekend, and the list of names that were out there. I think Paulo Fonseca we kind of knew about as being a potential overseas appointment last week, but there were other names in there. Roberto Martinez, Frank Lampard and John Terry's names were thrown in there. Eddie Howe, Lucien Favre, Eric Ten Hag. There have been a lot of names. Unai Emery's wasn't in that piece at the time. How late was the approach to his advisors and potentially the Villarreal?
I'm not going to lie to you. I hadn't heard Unai Emery's name, but other people had done. So maybe that's a failure of myself as a journalist. I think what was happening was there were a lot of names being put out there almost as diversionary tactics. And they have spoken to most of those people that you just mentioned. They've spoken to all of them. But Emery's name was there, I think, from the beginning, according to people I've spoken to today. So I don't think it's like they've come to him late. I think they've worked through the process and got to this decision. Now, Eddie Howe is also still under consideration. I need to stress that. I think he's definitely the backup option in case Emery says no. And I think we're all in the Northeast now, and English football as a whole, we'll all be slightly waiting with bated breath, actually, because we want to see what Emery's going to do. The president of Villarreal was spoken today, and as you would maybe expect, as said, we expect him to honour his contract. But there were also a couple of little snippets in there saying that, not that he expects him to honour his contract, but that he doesn't think Emery will leave. Now, he's given that interview today. It might be wishful thinking on his part, of course, and I know my gut feeling would be that it is, but there's still a lot of things to be thrashing out. And Emery hasn't said yes yet. So until you actually get him to say yes, and he comes over, flies over to England and signs a contract, I have a very, very simple rule in journalism with anything like this. And until it's done, it's not done. And this still isn't done. So we're edging closer to it. And it would be a very exciting appointment, I think, a progressive appointment, and a positive move by the new owners, but it's not done yet. So I think the next 48 hours will be key. The next
couple of hours could be key, because we could end up in a situation tonight whereby you would imagine Villarreal are going to beat young boys. Manchester United could end up on the wrong side of a defeat in Bergamo, and you've got Villarreal, who are top of their group in the Champions League, and their manager walking out to head to a team who, let's be honest, are relegation candidates in the Premier League this year.
Yeah, and I think that's what worries me a little bit. I do worry a little bit, and I'm a natural pessimist with football. It comes from covering the Republic of Ireland for several years, and also being a Leyton Orient fan and covering Northeast football in England. But
could have led with Orient there, Luke. To be fair,
I could have led for Orient. I thought I'd go with my target audience.
You buried the lead
and talk about the Irish national team. But yeah. You would have to worry, I think, if Villarreal beat young boys tonight, which they would be expected to do, despite all the distractions of possibly losing their manager. But I'm sure Villarreal are absolutely furious that this has come out on the day of the game. They would feasibly be top of their Champions League group, and Emery could just decide, I'd rather stay with a club that's in the Champions League. They're not doing very well in La Liga, I should add. I think they've only won 2 games this season. They're very much mid-table in the league. He's under a bit of pressure there, but if they were to win tonight, and there's a good chance of qualifying for the knockout stages of the Champions League, will he, for everything you've just said, want to just say, okay, I want to go back to the Premier League, but I'll go back now in the middle of the season with a squad that isn't mine, that I haven't got any time to improve or any hope of improving until January, where they'll only be able to do limited improvements in January. And look, Newcastle could definitely go down. they could definitely go down this season. They could have gone down any of the last 4 seasons that they've been in the Premier League with the quality of players that they have at their disposal. It is a bottom 5, bottom 6 Premier League squad, I think, this season for sure, because other teams that finished in and around them last season improved and Newcastle didn't. So they're 6 points adrift to safety already. And it would be a remarkable coup to get a manager like Emery to leave Villarreal in the Champions League, to come to Newcastle. But they are also a unique football club. They do have special pulling power despite all their problems and rank mediocrity that they've had over the last 14 years. There's something about Newcastle that football people, particularly managers, are drawn to. It's why Rafa Benitez was drawn to them, and it's presumably why Unai Emery, who's obviously managed against Newcastle and been to St James's Park, why Emery is interested in them after his time at Arsenal. So I would say it's not done yet, though. It's still in the balance, and we just have to wait and see. And we will know by the end of the week. But personally, I think that the talk of him being in charge of the team against Brighton this weekend, I wouldn't expect that, even if he was appointed.
Yeah.
I think Graham Jones will be in charge of the team, and I think Graham Jones has been told that. So I think we'll be waiting until the international break for the new man to actually take charge of the team.
Yeah, football here is on off the ball. Pardon me, is brought to you by Sky. Watch every UEFA Champions League and Europa League match live on BT Sport this season. Luke, like, Unai Emery is a guy who's won the Europa League for fun, most recently, of course, with Villarreal back in May. But the perception of him in England is coloured somewhat by his tenure at Arsenal, which was by no means a failure, but also was by no means a success either. Now, I guess the opinion on the ground in Newcastle would be not through what he's done at Sevilla or Villarreal, but would be what he's done or not at Arsenal. And there was, like, rightly or wrongly, and I'd say wrongly, there was this kind of banter element around Emery, especially towards the end of his time at Arsenal. The whole, quote unquote, good evening stuff, which didn't, colour anybody brilliantly. How prevalent is that on the ground? Is there a sense of excitement about Emery's appointment, or does that stuff still hang over him in terms of the perception of him from those in the Northeast?
When you've supported a club who over the last, say 20 years, if I pick out some of the names for you: Alan Pardew, John Carver, Steve McLaren, Steve Bruce, Sam Allardyce, Chris Hughton, and then you compare that to someone like, obviously, Rafa Benitez. They love Rafa Benitez, and then Unai Emery. It's a different league of manager. You're fishing in a completely different lake for and I think that's important. And I think they will look at, Newcastle fans aren't stupid, and most football fans these days aren't quite the little Englanders that perhaps they might have been in the past. And maybe there is perception of some football fans over in Ireland that the English football crowds aren't aware of what's going on outside of the British Isles. But I think that's wrong, and I think Newcastle fans will look at what he did at Valencia, Seville. He's been manager of Paris Saint-Germain. He's won trophies, he's won silverware. Newcastle crave silverware more than anything. I think they will look at that actually more than they worry about what happened at Arsenal. Now, going into Arsenal, he was very, very highly rated when he went into Arsenal. Let's not forget that. He went into Arsenal with a really big reputation and actually did pretty well in his first season. He also inherited a club that had been Arsene Wenger's personal kingdom for years and years and years. And in the same way that Manchester United have struggled since Ferguson left and hadn't found the right manager, I think you could probably say the same about Arsenal. I think they're going through exactly the same process. I think there was some bad recruitment at Arsenal. I'm not sure how involved he was in recruitment at Arsenal. But yes, everything you say is right. He has failed in his only job in the Premier League. We can't ignore that. And he inherited a far better squad at Arsenal than he will be getting at Newcastle. But his pedigree in a manager is not like anything they could have considered before this takeover happened. And I think Newcastle fans will look at what he's done in Spain, in France, and looked at those trophies and looked at the way he's handled himself. I mean, let's not forget, he beat Manchester United in the Europa League final with Villarreal last season and thoroughly deserved to do so as well. So a really good manager. I don't think we can argue that he's not a really good manager. He's a far better manager, as I keep saying, than they could have hoped to have appointed when Mike Ashley was still owner. So, yes, every appointment of a manager comes with a risk. There are risks attached to Unai Emery, but if you went through every single candidate and all the names you listed before that I'd spoken about, every single one of them came with an asterisk as well. So there's always an element of risk, but his pedigree, the fact he's got a point to prove, the things he's achieved in the game, I think this is the least risky of all of the candidates out there, and I think it will be a very, very welcome appointment. And as I said at the top of the interview, I think this will really sort of kick-start this takeover and what the new owners are about and what this new era is going to be about at Newcastle United.
The one thing that got everybody giddy about the takeover at Newcastle was obviously the deep pockets of the PIF. They clearly will have money to spend in the transfer market. The word I've heard is not, they're not going to be extravagant. They're going to be, pretty careful about how they spend the money, but there will be money to spend. How much autonomy or otherwise will whoever turns out to be manager in the next 48 hours to a week at Newcastle, how much autonomy will they have in January as regards who they try to sign?
I can't say with any degree of certainty, but because of all the things I've talked about there, with the lack of a management structure above him and the fact that he's going to be employed by people with no football expertise, it's probably quite a good time for Unai Emery to come in terms of having that power in the transfer market, because they will take his recommendations more seriously. There's not a sporting director, there's not a head of recruitment, so he will have more power certainly in January to sign the players he wants. Now, there is an argument to say that it would have been better to get somebody who knew the English market better or the British market better, in terms of buying players with Premier League experience, because I think that's what they're going to need in January to get out of trouble. But I think it's a good time for Emery because he will have that power, he will have that autonomy. You would suspect to be able to make the signings he wants to do in the positions he wants to do. He'll also get a decent amount of time to assess the squad. He's going to get 6 weeks until the window opens, something like that. So he's got a bit of time to see what he needs. So I think in a funny way, it's actually good that he would get the job and there'll be no one above him, because I think that the board will look to him for more football expertise than perhaps they would have done if he came in 12 months' time, once they've got the sporting director in place and once they've got the CEO in place. Because all modern football clubs now, no matter who the owners are, they all have a recruitment team now. The manager does not control recruitment. There isn't a single top club in Europe where the manager or the head coach is in charge of recruitment solely. It varies how much influence they have from club to club, but there's always a head of recruitment or a sporting director or somebody like that. So eventually that will be the case at Newcastle, because Newcastle want to be a top football club. Now, I don't think they are going to do a Manchester City. I don't think they will do or a Chelsea. I don't think they're going to spend vast sums of money in every single transfer window to power up into the Champions League places and be winning the major prizes in 3, 4, 5 years. But I think it's probably 10 years will be a more realistic target, and the money will filter in. It's going to take some time to get the sponsorship deals in place, presumably from Saudi Arabia. I know there's been some attempt to restrict what you can do with that, but it won't really hold them back, because fair market value, which is what the Premier League restrictions are going to be, fair market value is effectively what your rivals are earning. And look how Manchester City sponsorship deals work, and Man U and Chelsea and all the top clubs, and how much money they get. That is going to increase Newcastle's spending power phenomenally on what they've been able to do. And actually, so it will take some time, but it's exciting. And it's just do you know what, the best thing I can say from a media point of view and from a supporter point of view is Newcastle United are an ambitious football club. Once again, they were in the 90s when I first fell in love with football. They were in the early noughties when I first became a journalist up here covering the Bobby Robson team that finished in the top 4 twice. They were ambitious. They haven't been ambitious for so long. And whatever happens from here onwards, and there will be mistakes and there will be setbacks, and there'll probably be the odd crisis as well, they're an ambitious football club again. And I think that is all really that Newcastle fans have wanted, and it's exciting to be able to say that about one of the great sort of English football clubs, really.
Yeah, good stuff. Luke Edwards from The Telegraph, thanks so much for joining us, and enjoy the chaos of the next few months as well.
I will. Thank you.
Cheers, take care.